Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Amanda and this is Birch and Lily, where I talk about all of the crafty goodness that I have been working on over the past couple weeks. Today is a little bit of a different episode. I'm going to be showing you how to insert a lifeline into your knitting. All you're going to need for this is obviously your knitting. I just have a tiny little swatch here, some scrap yarn, and some tapestry needles. You might see them called yarn needles, darning needles, lots of different things. But that is all you are going to need. So the first thing I like to do when I'm putting in a lifeline is actually take my knitting and push it onto the cables of my needle. Now obviously this is not going to be possible if you're using straight needles or DPNs, but it will still work basically the same if the stitches are sitting on your needle as well. So I push them onto my cables, then I take my darning needle and I thread it with my scrap yarn. Usually I would recommend that you use a yarn that is thinner than the yarn you are working with, just so it's a little bit easier to slide it through these stitches. So I am knitting with a DK weight here, and I'm using a fingering weight to put in my lifeline. It's also helpful if the yarn is a contrasting color to the project you're working on, so you can pick it out in your work, but not totally necessary, and it will still do the exact same job that you need it to. And make sure you're using scrap yarn, because why waste a nice new skein? So I'm going to take my darning needle here. Looking at my knitting, all I'm going to do is go through every single loop sitting on my cable here. Now sometimes you might find it easier to do it in sections, so let me pull that back out and show you what I mean. And apologies for the needle sound, it's kind of impossible to get rid of that, unfortunately. So I've threaded my needle with my scrap yarn. I'll hold it a little bit closer too. So I go through the loop sitting on my cable there with the darning needle. So say I only wanted to go through a couple stitches and that was getting a little awkward, you can just pull the yarn through and then keep going. So you're just going to keep doing that through every single stitch that is resting on your cable, your needles, however you're doing it. And, okay, second side. Okay, so I have taken my darning needle and I have gone all the way through all of the stitches on my needle. Your lifeline is in. Now, what would you use a lifeline for? I like to use it when I'm doing lace knitting. I also like to use it, say I'm learning a new technique and I'm unsure if I'm going to be able to do it properly. It just gives me that assurance that if I have to pull it out and off my needles, there's literally no way it's going to come undone because the lifeline is holding those stitches in place for you. So this is not going to fall apart. Now if you accidentally pull it tight like that, it can be a little fun to find your stitch once in a while. You might have to go in there and like pop it back out. Come a little bit closer. So here's my loop, and you can see how the green kind of went through there. So I'll just stick my needle in and pop that stitch back out, just because it got pulled a little tight. Anyways, so you've pulled out your needles, you've pulled your knitting back to your lifeline. All you do to get it back on your needles is, again, take the needle you're working with and poke it through all of those holes. So if I was working with magic loop, I would do half of my stitches that I'm putting back onto the needle. Then I would pull that whole cable most of the way through. Remove some of this tangly yarn here. So now the cable, I have one needle on this side, one needle on this side, like that. I have half the stitches. You flip it, grab the needle again, and go through the rest of the stitches. Try and hold that needle up so it doesn't make any noise. So here, like I said, I had a couple stitches that got pulled a little too tight. They're obviously still there. They haven't fallen out, but you might have to go in and just fiddle a tiny bit to be able to get them to pop up again. One more. Sometimes you can also just yank on the green, your lifeline, and it will pull the stitch back out for you as well. So all my stitches are back on the needle and I haven't lost anything. So now what you could do obviously is continue knitting again, or if you're happy, you don't feel like you need the lifeline anymore, all you do in my tangle of yarn here is find your end, put that aside, obviously because mine's still connected to the ball. If it wasn't, you could grab either end. But I'll usually push it back to the cable again, just so it's got a little bit more space, and you just pull it out. So hopefully that helps you with putting in a lifeline on your knitting. They are fantastic. Great for honestly anyone. You don't have to be a new knitter. I do recommend them obviously for new knitters, because if you're learning a new technique, this is a great way to make sure that you don't lose all of your progress. But it's also great for something complicated like lace knitting or cables, to put a lifeline in and have that assurance that if you do mess up, you don't have to rip all the way back to the end of your knitting, or the beginning, I guess. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me down below. I'd be happy to help you out. And if you did like what you saw today, please make sure you subscribe and like this video. And I will see you all again next time. Bye!